Okay, so I'm Michael Downing from MDSV Capital. Thrilled to be moderating this panel. We're going to be talking to these four individuals who are the early stage investors in AI companies. The first 50K check, the first 100K check. I think most importantly, these are the folks who are really in the trenches, seeing the entrepreneurs at those earliest stages and making those decisions around who to support and who to get involved with. So just real quickly, why don't we get started with a quick introduction from each of you, maybe a quick overview on your fund, and we'll start, Arpan, with you down at the end.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good to meet you. Thanks for having us, Michael. My name is Arpan Punyani. I am co-founder and general partner of a seed stage firm called Garuda Ventures. We are a relatively new firm. I spent 8 years prior to this at Okta, the identity and access management company. My partner Rishi and I have built Garuda Ventures. We're pre-seed and seed. Typical check size between $500,000 to $1 million. We have basically a B2B general focus, but more specifically apps and APIs, cybersecurity and infrastructure. Also some work around fintech and commerce, as well as climate software. Yeah, excited to be, we have been investing in AI. Did you want us to talk about some companies now, or did you want to come back to that?
We'll get to that.
Good. Okay.
I'm going to grill you on that.
We'll get back to that. Thanks.
First of all, thanks for everybody for attending. I'm Nate Williams. I'm the co-founder and managing partner at Union Labs. We were spun out of Kleiner Perkins with support from Kleiner Perkins and Google Ventures. We invest in seed stage deep tech, average check size, $1 million, made 19 investments out of our first fund. 10 of those investments were led by female, immigrant, or diverse founders. And our thesis is seed stage deep tech, climate, prop tech, and mobility, with 3 enabling technologies: AI, machine learning. We focus a lot, secondly, on robotics. And third, although it's no longer a buzzword anymore, a lot in the IoT and comm stack.
Yeah. Likewise, thank you for having me. My name is Amit, co-founder, managing partner of Tau Ventures. We are 50 companies, 85 million AUM, writing check size of $500,000. AI first fund. We started before AI was such a big buzzword. I do the healthcare side. My partner Sanjay does the enterprise side. And the things that I look for, I'll give you a few examples here: computer vision to detect cancer, machine learning for doing drug discovery, machine learning for detecting fraud, waste, and abuse in healthcare payments. These are all real examples. We're founders turned investors, trying to build here a firm that is truly, truly founder first.
Hi, Todd, Stavish, managing partner, SRI Ventures. This is our campus here. We do about 250K pre-seed seed investing. We also uniquely add intellectual property from the parent corporation into our investments. Our investment thesis is driven by the IP. So we've done space investments in a new constellation of GPS called Zona. We've done, I'm not mentioning company names yet, Michael. We've done a lot of AI investments. One of our recently closed investments is here in the room. So a wide variety of robotics, med tech, you name it. We have a broad aperture for investing.
Awesome, thanks. So let's get it started. Dimitri was talking about this a second ago. Obviously, there's an enormous amount of activity in the AI space. We were just talking about it with Constantine from Sequoia. I think there were 650 companies that were seeded in Q1 alone in the AI space, which is just insane to think about, and about $2 billion over the last 10 to 12 months put into AI startups. So giving you guys a real softball to begin, what are the general areas that include AI where you're looking specifically, where you're focusing on and looking for opportunities? Todd, you want to get us started?
Yeah, I mean, I think, LLMs, generative AI was kind of the focus of a lot of the conversations today. I think like ChatGPT is one of the best demo machines on the planet. Like we see like a lot of the demos now are just really just ChatGPT. And so what we're looking for in our startups, recent AI startups, are actual engineering, right? So are they using open source models, generative ones, along with ChatGPT? Do they have unique IP around training their models? Do they have unique access to training data sets? None of this has actually changed. Do they understand the domain that they're investing in or trying to attack from a GTM perspective? So it's more than just what the general models can produce. There has to be, weight to their engineering team and ability to produce things.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to ask a question. Who here in the audience has had a bad experience with healthcare? Your bill came out too high, an appointment didn't happen, a follow-up that should have happened didn't happen. I could go on, but I think everybody will raise their hand. And I'll raise my hand multiple times. Those are the things that get me excited. Not the problems, but the fact that we may be able to solve these problems, or at least make them less worse. So I'm looking at applied AI. Fundamentally, our thesis is you don't need a PhD in machine learning at this point to leverage AI to solve a problem. Sure, I'm sure there's lots of people with PhDs here in the audience, but there's a whole bunch of other people who can work with the PhDs to solve those problems. And I'll give an example. The very first investment we did through our fund, it was a doctor who knew how to code and found somebody who was really smart in terms of PhD in computer science. And he trained his algorithm on 20,000 videos from 40 different hospitals to be able to detect a polyp. And the polyps, for those who know this, it's hidden in the folds of your intestine. It's small. It's hard to detect. You have to actually do a colonoscopy, which is the most fun thing ever. But he was able to get the rate of detection of those polyps up to 99%. Now, think about it, 99%. The standard of care today, the best doctors get to 75%. If you're able to make that delta, you detect something, you can treat that person, you basically can help save somebody from cancer. So those are the things that get me excited.
I think I would answer the question slightly different. When we were formulating our fund, one of the things we saw about deep tech investing across a variety of the platforms that are seed vehicles all the way to multi-billion-dollar funds was this arms race to sort of outstory and out PhD each other. And those of us in the room have probably seen that in our lives as founders and entrepreneurs. Technology to create a successful, franchise company, something that's going to last the time, something that Sequoia would invest, is a heck of a lot more than just the tech. And so one of the things I would say first is deep tech investing is not just taking stuff from the PhD program and spending money to sort of de-risk it. It's actually going out in the world and finding a real world problem. And so one of the core thesis of Union, where again, without going to specifics, we have 5 Fortune 1000 corporate LPs in our fund who actually represent communications, oil and gas, et cetera. We're hearing about real world problems. So I think that's part one, is to really think about, is the problem we're solving? The second thing is, as a seed investor, as opposed to a Series A investor, B, when I was at Kleiner Perkins, these were teams that were already formed, that already had revenue traction and product. So you're making a different type of investment. The type of investment that I'm making as a general partner, I'm making an investment in a human, an individual, their aspirations, their hopes, their ethics, their background. And so I think that's where seed investing is a little more personal. So to answer your question more broadly, I think the skill set that's required on this stage, number one, is like empathy. Some of us on the stage have been founders, so we know what it's like to go from 0 to 1. I think the next is trying to understand what the market will be. If all we were proxies for Andreessen and Kleiner and Sequoia, we hear what they want to invest in Series A and do it. That doesn't make us important. I think the role of a seed investor is actually to break some new technologies and new approaches that could be fundable at Series A. So to quote a Sequoia partner, Dean Valentine, you have to be contrarian and right to matter. So we have to take some contrarian bets. That's kind of what I get paid to do.
Yeah, echo all these thoughts. I mean, for us in particular, definitely similar to some other comments, application layer focused. If I give a couple examples of companies we have invested in, and one that I've invested in personally, we're investors in a company called Arena AI. They're out of New York, incredibly talented technical team, sort of automating business decisions through nodes at the edge of, in particular, CPG use cases. Personal investor in a company called Reggie.ai, which is sales generative AI for sales content and marketing content. We're investors in a company called MetaView, which is doing interview analytics, and they basically dramatically pivoted their roadmap towards AI note taking tailored to the interview use case. So all of those are application layer focused, and I think the other layer I'd add on to Nate's comment in particular was my personal sort of training, if you will, was at Okta. The founders are incredibly commercially oriented. We were backed by Sequoia as well. Pat Grady sat on our board, and that's another thing we're looking for. We're back as seed investors, and again, not sure of what sophistication the audience may have about these different things about stages of capital, but you got to pick your lane as an investor, both in terms of categories and stage. And having a commercial orientation, not just a technical orientation, incredibly important. And if a founder has that commercial aptitude, or a founding team has that hunger to sell, likes to sell, or is eager to learn how to sell, that gets us very excited.
Great. So, each one of you are investing at the pre-seed and seed stage. This is especially hard because sometimes the product doesn't even exist. Most times revenue doesn't exist. And so you're going along with the vision and trying to, go on that journey with the founder. The last time we saw one of these really major kind of transformational movements, or one of the last times, was when AWS and EC2 came out, and all of a sudden you had all this compute power and storage that you could use to build companies. And all of a sudden the cost of companies to start a company went way down, and there was such a thing as the 100K startup, which is now maybe the 25K startup, right? So how fundamentally does this wave of AI change, what you're doing at that early stage? Are you investing in more companies but writing smaller checks, or are you looking at the opportunities differently because of AI? Arpan?
Yeah, I guess I'll take a swing first. We're a relatively new firm. We're also finding our swim lane. And again, to beat that point earlier that I made earlier, also as entrepreneurs, you've got to know who you're talking to when you're speaking to approaching investors about potentially investing. So one reaction to Michael, to your comment, is I've spoken to, for example, someone recently who's doing AI, and there are probably more than one of these AI-focused incubators. It could be a shots on goal type opportunity. That's not us in particular, but those are at particularly conservative valuations and just getting started, pre-seed, if you will, sometimes. And so that's one possible way for some investors to embrace the fact that the cost of starting up, not just from a compute standpoint, but from I can plug into OpenAI and do something productive right away, is dropping, and the time is shrinking dramatically. But yeah, I think the other comment I'll hand off to Mike is it's changing so fast. I don't have to tell anyone in this room that, nor the folks up here. So we look for founders who are going to tell us what the future is, and try to find them and partner with them. So I don't know the answers, but I know that it's changing very fast, and it's a good analogy, the AWS type analogy. But let's see it in action.
What do you think, Nate? Is it getting cheaper, faster? You going to do more shots on goal?
I mean, there's two parts to that question. I hope there's no lawyers in the audience. I would say it's getting a heck of a lot cheaper to incorporate a startup. So if we think of what the end state will be, inherently, this type of leverage from AI will allow companies to be created, at a faster rate with less investment capital. The same way when, I was running my first company in the IoT space, it was eventually acquired by Sanjay Jha when he ran Motorola. We actually had servers. Like, we paid for servers. There wasn't AWS. So now folks never think of AWS or GCP. I think it will change. And this will happen over the next 12 to 36 months. So then the next question is, what does it mean as an investor? I think there's two different camps, right, in terms of investment. There's one that's more passive, more shots on goal, right? That's not who we are. I know your firm as well. It's not. We're more conviction based. We want high, conviction, 20 bets per fund. And we want to roll up our sleeves and solve a product issue or go to market issue. And so again, the art of founding a company and walking through those first 18, 24 months, there's always one or two existential issues that can blow up the company. It could be a founder issue. It could be a tech issue. It could be an IP issue. And so the role of this sort of counsel is definitely not a boss. It's definitely not anything other than I'm a friend, I'm a training partner, I'm somebody who can be an advocate. And hopefully our experience collectively on the stage can turn over some advice that in critical times can help you unlock value.
Yeah, makes sense. And just to be clear, I remember well having servers in a closet in a cage and having to like turn them on and off and that pain and misery as the oldest guy on the stage right now. So Amit, what do you think about, for pre-seed and seed stage startups, they're mostly running experiments to try to find product market fit, try to find those customers, see if they can scale something. I mean, with AI tools now, can't we automate that product market fit journey? Can't we like figure out a way to actually do that more efficiently? And, entrepreneurs can sit on a beach and.
Yeah, well, if we could automate that, we could also automate the decision to invest in them. And then all four of us here.
And that's where this all goes. All
Yeah,
these guys are getting replaced.
VC.ai, basically, yes. Yes, to a certain degree, AI gives you power. You can do a lot more. You have a lot more data. You can make a lot more sense. I'm going to use an analogy from one of our portfolio companies. Well, the company has exited at this point, but it was a drug discovery company. Their value proposition was, look, we're going to be able to analyze not just one compound, but 100 compounds, 100 times faster. You're going to be able to discover some drugs potentially for cancer, for COVID, or whatever it is, 100 times faster. You still need a human being to go and analyze it. You still need judgment. The machine does not have judgment. The machine has power until we hit the singularity. So applying that analogy for pre-seed and seed, what you can do is a lot more experiments, but which experiments to do, what the data really means. For all of that, you still need very much judgment. I don't see the role of entrepreneurs diminishing. I actually think what AI is, it's a multi-dimensional Swiss knife. It allows you to do a lot more things, but it also gives you the responsibility to choose more wisely. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck doing a lot of things that go nowhere.
So I won't answer it technically. So we're on track to do about twice the amount of deals we do in a regular year, or last year at least. And I think it's more than just like maybe new models. There's more entrepreneurs on the street. There's less competitive capital coming in, or not as much. So there's a lot of factors. What we think is interesting is like, yes, there are more models available and they're easier to use and you can probably pivot quicker than you could historically if you're developing your own machine learning models. But what we think is interesting is like, and what the parent company does here is like the researchers, they solve hard problems and they make things usable in real world scenarios. So this week we released a paper on how to detect hallucinations and hopefully how to prevent them, right? So that would be great. Like if you watch some of the multi-round conversational things from like ChatGPT, it gets funky like 2 or 3 in, right? Like that's meaningful, right? And like it'll help someone run their business. But what came up earlier with Karen, human safety is a factor there too, right? Or if we can prevent that. And then, also how can we take some of these large language models and maybe reduce them? Databricks put out a paper on Poly, which they're using a couple of 2-year-old model to do, not as broad as chat or GPT variants, but maybe in a particular domain. That's really exciting because previously in my career, I've always betted with open source, and I think open source still has a shot here to compete against some of the bigger companies producing the large language models. So interesting times.
So let me ask the group. Go ahead, Arpan.
I apologize. I just want to add one comment that came to mind, which was you were asking about pre-seed and seed and taking a lot of bets. I mean, one thing I've been thinking about in this is, we're pre-seed and seed investors, day zero, but where that phenomenon of trying a lot of things quickly could and is manifesting is, I would say, growth stage companies, or like not brutally capital constrained companies, which is pre-seed and seed. If you raise $500,000 or $1.5 million, you have to be hyper focused to unlock another round of capital, particularly in this environment. We have companies that are Series B, Series C. MetaView is just one example, which is able to move quickly enough as opposed to maybe some larger companies, and try some of these new things because of the low cost of experimentation. And so I think you could see some of these things emerge at funded, but not sort of massive incumbent companies rather than at day zero or at day one.
So that's an interesting point. There's these incredible tools that entrepreneurs can use where they can move faster, scale quicker. What has changed? Are you guys noticing that when you meet with a startup now, they're further down the path, they have more to show, they have more traction? What's different? Todd, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, if Ryan's still here, we just closed in a company called Go Charlie in the back. Ryan's one of the partners here at SRI Ventures. they're revenue positive. They're generative. I mean, like
Good
right
Lord.
out of the gate.
That was quick.
Yeah. And so, good one, Ryan. But, I mean, you didn't see that before, right? Like before you go through, like, what's my training data set? Can I get it from my customers? Can I build a model? And this team, could just do it in under a year or two timeframe. So pretty incredible.
That's awesome. Nate, what's different?
I just came back last week. I was at Sundance at a McKinsey AI conference with Tom Siebel and other folks. And like one of the things that folks talked about there, it was 75 people, hand selected, included 25 company chief strategy officers or CISOs, 25 entrepreneurs or VCs, and then, 25 startups. I think you have a question later about are we in a hype cycle? I believe we are. I would posit that hype cycles are important because they draw a line of attention to new technology. They draw people into new technology, et cetera. And so just a sidebar, having Snoop Dogg yesterday at the Milken conference, look it up, talk about AI, right? Having Chegg reporting their earnings, and they actually blame their earnings miss on Chat GPT-4, right? And then everywhere you go, there's a discussion of AI. I think that's indicative of where we're at.
Yeah.
And then to answer your question more directly, what I'm seeing in this market right now is because the buyer universe is more aware that AI can solve problems at scale, I think they're more likely. So I'll give you two examples. We're an investor in a company, Urban Sky, along with Techstars and others. It's the leading U.S. Stratospheric microballoon company. So if you saw in the news regarding the Chinese balloons, Urban Sky was actually doing the path planning. They have their own balloon here in the US that's used for vegetation management, for defense, et cetera. They used AI to path predict when that would leave the US and where at Myrtle Beach. And so because of so much hype, they're getting so much DoD contracts, et cetera. Second is we backed the team from Kymeta that formed a new company called Rendered AI. So Nathan Kuhn's from Duke PhD. It's us, Space Capital, InQtel, and Congruent Ventures. So this is basically a training platform for generative AI that fits into a workflow tool. They just announced a partnership with Planet Labs. So if we think about these corner cases where there's not a lot of real world data, so in geospatial, they can create synthetic data sets that allow to train the AI. And we're seeing in this market right now, the amount of buyers of their technology probably quadrupled in like 2 quarters. Just meaning, Mark Andreessen would say product market fit is really indicative, not you making phone calls anymore. Like your phone rings and somebody you pick it up and it's like, hey, I want to buy your product. I'm starting to see that with some of our AI portfolio companies, and that part's pretty exciting.
Interesting. What do you think, Amit?
Yeah, I was going to build on what Nate just said around hype. If you ask the question, are we in a bubble? You probably already know the answer, honestly. So yes, I do think that we're living right now through this, this part of the cycle and the Gartner hype cycle. There will be a valley eventually and a plateau of happiness. But I want to share our bigger picture. What we're seeing overall, going back to your question here, Michael, what is different? We're noticing entrepreneurs a lot more tired, specifically a lot more tired of us, of VCs. I keep hearing this from our portfolio and pipeline. They keep saying, oh my God, the VCs are doing so much longer to do a deal. They're not doing deals. They're holding back. And I do want to raise this issue that the market right now is, excuse my French, shitty. It is quite bad for fundraising. Yet there are areas, generative AI being one, what we have been talking about right now being amazing for fundraising. But overall, it is tougher to fundraise right now. And we keep telling our entrepreneurs and prospective entrepreneurs that, look, plan for 40% more time, 40% more meetings, 40% worse valuation or terms, 40% more stress, and 40%, by the way, is the median. It's a big variance. So I keep hearing this from our portfolio and of our entrepreneurs, and I think it's a test of resilience. Like we do have more startups getting created now than ever before. Part of it is the cost of creating startups has lowered. Part of it is because there are more entrepreneurs in the market. Like you think about all the tech layoffs, the 100,000 people that have been laid off, even 1% of them goes on to create a company. That's 1,000 more new companies. So I'm personally excited about where we are despite the difficulty, but feet on the ground, like you will have a harder time fundraising.
Yeah, and I'll just add a little bit. I mean, this is a universal comment, whether it's AI or not, but authentic connection between the entrepreneur and the problem. Someone mentioned metaverse when Constantine was being asked earlier. It's not an area we looked at, you can spend time on. Maybe at the infrastructure layer, that'd be interesting. But the Pratap Ranade, who's the founder of Arena AI, he had built a company, sold to Palantir, that now started building Arena, bootstrapped it, and then raised his first round at a significant valuation because he had multiple millions of revenue. Authentic, deep connection between your entrepreneur and the problem. If that's true in the AI space, you're going to have an easier time getting funded than kids chasing the soccer ball on the field, right? Which is obviously a phenomenon that happens in capital and in startups. But if you've got a deep connection to what you're building, like something like what Nate was referring to, that is going to resonate with investors.
Makes sense. So you were talking, Nate, about the hype cycle and Snoop Dogg, who was supposed to be here, but he couldn't make it. If we look at other movements that have occurred before, we talked about AWS and EC2 coming out, which kind of changed the landscape for startups. The mobile movements in the mid 2000s, which spurred a ton of apps. Usually what we saw in those movements in the beginning, when that innovation first happened, there were a lot of little incremental companies that were created. And usually not many of those turned out to be super valuable. And then in the second wave of companies that came, you saw larger kind of platform propositions. How are you guys thinking about this right now? There's already been a few articles written about this, even in the last week, that there's going to be 1,000 AI startups and approximately none of them that, exist in 2 years. What's your general?
Yeah, I think there has been this trope perpetuated that there's like the startup world and then the incumbents, the Microsofts, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Apples. And some folks are proposing that a majority of the value creation will end up at those larger publicly traded companies. I don't believe that. And I don't believe that just because the nature of startups is, about taking on incumbency. And so I think in that vertical focused means whether it's AI for legal or AI for climate or AI for the digital physical world, like the OT world, IT/OT transition, I think there'll be some valuable plays. A question that does go through our mind is the ability to generate a moat. So if you're sitting on top of like a open source LLM model, we're asking questions of like, first mover advantage isn't necessarily a great moat. And in some cases, like sort of Lyft versus Uber isn't a great moat because you outspend.
Yeah.
So we're spending time thinking about that. But one thing that I would say that I find to be different about this market that leads me to be very positive is the fact that I do believe that this hype cycle, which has been so steep, right? Never in the history of any application, if we think of like Chat GPT-4, 0 to 250 million users in like 2 months. It's never happened before.
Right.
And it's not all the people just in this room. It's people that we don't think that are using it. So to me, the rules are different. And so I find this opportunity in this movement where I think there will be some very large, very meaningful companies that will survive and dictate the next hype cycle. And so the only thing I would just back up and say, I was an entrepreneur during the IoT hype cycle, and there were parts that I benefited from in terms of raising money from, Maveron, Cowboy Ventures, Bessemer, et cetera. And then when it went to not being that cool, we also benefited because we had less competition. We also had access to capital. We had great talented engineers. So I think when we get into the trough, right, of disillusionment, I actually think there's some opportunity there as well.
I want to build on the term you just said, the first mover advantage. I'm a firm believer on second mover advantage. It's often a difference between invention and innovation. The person who invents is rarely the winner. Think about Facebook, since we just mentioned. It wasn't the first social network. debatable which one was the first, but it was probably Friendster. Google famously was like the 17th search engine that came out. And yet they control 80% of the market share today. So you learn from the lessons of the companies that came before you. You just can't be too early or too late. If you have the fifth mover advantage or seventh mover advantage, then there's too much competition. It's a red ocean, to use the McKinsey term. At least what I have seen often is when there's about 20% market adoption, that's usually the tipping point. If you see 250 million people using ChatGPT, coming close to 20% of the people who use the internet in a meaningful way, probably the next big company is being created right now. In fact, it's probably already been created. I just don't know which one it is. If you guys do, please let me know.
I'll just add a little bit on. I mean, I'm careful with the number of ChatGPT users because it's a democratizing force, right? I mean, just because people are using word processors doesn't mean there's gonna be more startups. I mean, it's, instead of typewriters and personal computers or the internet or mobile phones, I mean, it doesn't mean there's going to be thousands more startups. It's just there's just more users. Is my opinion.
So having looked at the RSVPs of both, people attending and people on the Zoom, there was probably 70 plus startups who are watching this or attending here. So, definitely want to make sure that those folks can get a hold of you guys if they want to pitch you, show you what they're doing, et cetera. And maybe as a quick point to end on, why don't you guys give us just not necessarily, actually not a company you've invested in, but an AI startup that's just got a really friggin' cool technology that you've seen that just kind of blew your mind. Todd?
One that we were just talking, I think Constantine mentioned it. I thought Hugging Face was just an absolutely cool company, right? Like GitHub for models, made it just kind of, more usable than just developing on your own. Network effect, all the above. I'm gonna vote for that. Same with Constantine.
Good one.
I'm sorry, I'm going to subvert your question a little bit. I work with healthcare. Technology matters a lot, but what matters even more in healthcare is that you integrate into the workflow of the doctor, that you make it accessible to patients, that pharma and payers don't oppose it. So what ends up mattering a lot is not necessarily, oh my God, this is going to solve all your problems. It is, this is actually going to get used. So a lot of the innovation I see is basically taking 1980 to 1990. Sometimes 1990 to 2030, but more often than not is things that let's get rid of pagers. Let's actually use integration with EMRs so that different systems can talk to each other. And I'll use the specific example of a company called Infinitus. If you have spent any time with insurance, which I hope you haven't, it's essentially like hours and hours over days and days to get an answer. These guys looked at that and said, why don't we automate this so that when you call in, 90% of it is a machine who already knows a lot about it and gives you an answer. That's the technology I'm proud of because it can save billions of dollars. It can save all of us a lot of headache and can frankly save lives.
What was the name of that company?
Infinitus, infinitus.ai.
Infinitive. Okay.
Natural language processing for benefits management, if you want the keywords.
Awesome.
Actually, Constantine on the last panel had my answer, which was I was part of the team at Kleiner when they invested in Viz.ai. And so one of the fundamental tenets that I think is so important about AI is time to decision, right? So like if you can speed that time to decision, especially in a critical care case, my wife works at San Francisco General Hospital. I know what the stakes are. And so to me, having been a witness to some of the Kleiner health tech deals when I was over there was really impressive. And like Viz AI, even though it's out of my domain, when I saw it, I'm like, that's a company that can save, hundreds of thousands of lives or more at scale. And so that to me is like, that's why we do this, is to help a founder with a gleam in her eye to create something that has meaningful societal impact, whether in climate, whether in mobility, supply chain. That's kind of what excites me.
I'll give three kind of quick comments on this, Michael. One is I was at the RSA conference last week, cybersecurity conference, and I put a post out on LinkedIn. I mean, how is generative AI going to show up in security, offensively and defensively? It's pretty scary and interesting how fast and how sort of well LLMs can mimic authentic emails, for example. So I've got friends at an email security company called Material Security. There's a few others. So generative AI used offensively is something that is cool, but in a scary way. The second answer is it's not all about what's cool to invest in, but so I'm hijacking your question a little bit. So like, for example, there's a stealth company we're working with right now, also in sales tech. That's it's a bit of generative and a bit of predictive AI to sort of help the sales team figure out the right piece of content to share at the right time within the sales cycle. There's it's not mind blowing from a use case standpoint, but it's mind blowing potentially from an opportunity standpoint. And then the last comment on what was cool, maybe you guys have seen this, but this went a little bit viral this week, which was the Sal Khan talk, the TED talk. Anybody see it? He was explaining the Khan Academy bot and how the tutoring is going to become extraordinary, better than human tutors. The thing that kind of caught my eye in that TED talk that he gave was when he revealed some of the work that they were doing to develop it. I think the thing that was amazing was it was the internal dialogue that the AI was having with itself to determine whether it was going to be a good answer to the question for the fifth grader. It was extraordinary of a moment to sort of see. This is how many of you are aware of this, but to see how that AI was debating with itself. That was not a company per se, of course, a nonprofit. It's Khan Academy, but it's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. Arpan from Garuda Ventures, Nate from Union Labs, Amit from Tau Ventures, and of course, Todd Stavish from SRI Ventures. Thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate it.